Welcome to the Academy Show here on Blood Red as we take a dive into the youth ranks at Liverpool and bring you all the latest from Kirkby. Coming up, we'll be checking in on a goal fest for the under-23s against Manchester United. We'll discuss Liverpool's latest youngster to put pen to paper on professional terms. And as always, bring you our one to watch. Alongside, as ever, our man on the pulse when it comes to Academy matters, it is Matt Addison. Matt, how are we?
Yeah, very good, thanks. We're recording this, aren't we, a day before, so we just finished watching the Manchester City game that we're going to talk about, and plenty of goals going in, plenty of excitement, loads of things happening over the last couple of weeks. I think it's, about a month since we did the last Academy show, so plenty of stuff to talk through and go through. So yeah, it's an exciting time. It's good to have the football back.
Yeah, let's start with the team who then have been involved in so many goals recently, the under-23s. We'll start there. They've had a Carabao Cup game, under-21s, I think it is. Sorry, not Carabao Cup, the leasing.com EFL trophy, whatever it's called these days. They had a game with Wigan that didn't go their way, that had plenty of goals in. But on Friday night, they were at Old Trafford against Manchester United. And, well, it was a game that certainly lived up to the billing when these two sides come together.
Yeah, Leigh Sports Village rather than Old Trafford. But yes, it was 5-3. So 8 goals between the teams, and Clarkson, Ben Woodburn, Jack Byrne, he scored twice, and Louis Longstaff as well, all on the score sheet for Liverpool. 4-1 up at half-time, so it seemed to be all going swimmingly. Manchester United did sort of drag themselves back in, but there was a clear gulf between the two teams, I would say. Certainly on the night, Liverpool were deserving winners, by far and away the better side. And that hasn't always been the case at under 23 level. Obviously, we've seen, different teams. It sort of depends partly on what time of the year, who's the first team, who's out injured, that sort of thing. But at the moment, they seem to be really strong. Ben Woodburn was there, captained the side and played pretty well. I think we're going to talk about him a little bit later on in terms of, what happens next for him. But yeah, it was a fairly accomplished performance. I'm sure they'll want to improve, obviously, defensively, not to concede those 3 goals. But, generally it was a pretty decent showing, I would say.
Yeah, and as you said, decent showing. But as ever, as is always the case when Manchester United play Liverpool in whatever game, there is always a possibility for tempers to boil over, and certainly happened with the young lads on Friday night.
Yeah, it was Leighton Clarkson, not his finest moment. It's a dreadful tackle. I've seen the video back a couple of times, and it's a very, very high challenge halfway up the opponent's leg, and rightly got a red for that. It's not something we've seen often with him. He's very controlled, not just on the ball, but off it as well. Normally, his temperament is there or thereabouts. But yeah, on this occasion, he got a little bit excited. I think not the best tackle, but then the reaction, Shola Shortire, I believe is how you pronounce it, for Manchester United. His reaction got a red card as well. So it was 10v10 for however long, about half an hour or so, I think. But yeah, it was not the best moment for Leighton Clarkson. But again, it's something that he'll have to learn from. It's something that, as a senior player, you can't be getting yourself sent off in that manner, particularly, when you're 2 or 3 goals up, as they were at that particular moment in time. It was one of those games where the result was already decided. They just needed to keep cool and keep calm. And yeah, I'm sure it's something that he'll learn for future matches. But generally up until that point, he'd done quite well, and wasn't the only one. I think there was a few decent performances from them. So I'm sure Barry Lucas will be fairly pleased with the result and the performance overall, even if there were, as I say, 1 or 2 bits to improve upon.
Yeah, so attackingly, obviously, it was a good showing. 5 goals put past United for the young Reds. Who were the ones sort of catching the eye, Matt?
Yeah, there's a few different ones that I wanted to pick out, really. I think Longstaff and Byrne, obviously, both on the score sheet, very creative, very decisive in attacking moments, which, is exactly what you need. It's something that, we've always seen that they've both had the ability to create. We know that they're both good on the ball and can pass, and certainly can dribble as well. So it was good to see a bit more in the final third from them, obviously. Liverpool scoring 5 goals, that's always going to be important, to have those wide players being able to create things and, as I say, be really decisive. And behind them as well, Jake Kane, a brilliant start to the season. Him obviously moved up with Barry Lucas from the under-18s, now going to be, it seems, a regular for the 23s. So it was another good performance from him. He's, started the season, as I say, really well. Got a couple of goals from midfield already. And he's one of those that, a lot like Leighton Clarkson, really is ready to make that step up. Obviously, didn't have the blemish of the red card like Clarkson did, but certainly the two of those, I think, not just in terms of going forward individually, but I think they work really well together alongside each other. Both really good on the ball, as I say, but can put in a decent tackle most of the time as well. So yeah, Jake Kane is sort of one to watch, I think, particularly in the under-23s. Still obviously on the younger side in that age group, but certainly is a player that has impressed. And obviously I'm sure people will know who he is by now. Played plenty of times, played for the senior team, of course, against Shrewsbury as well. So it's a name certainly to keep in your head for the next few months and probably the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, he does seem to be one that's progressing rather nicely at Kirkby. What about a few of the others then? Under 23 is always a bit of a sliding doors time for some of the youngsters. You've got the ones coming up from the 18s, as you say there, with Jake Kane, who are looking to kick on and progress. But you've got others who can get trapped in there for sort of 3 or 4 years and not really seem to go anywhere. And I think there are probably a couple that fall into that bracket in this current group, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we mentioned Ben Woodburn, didn't we? I think he definitely is in need of a loan move, possibly even a permanent move, to be honest. Obviously, we're near the squad for the Carabao Cup and things like that. He seems to be a long way down the pecking order now. Very, technically gifted and very much a good player, but he's just probably not quite at that level to make it at Liverpool. I think, possibly a move, say, to the Championship or somewhere like that. He's obviously, impressed at Oxford, I think it was last season, wasn't it, where he went out and did pretty well there. Got an injury sort of, I think, maybe around this time of year, maybe slightly later, heading towards Christmas time. And he did come back from that, did, put in some decent performances. But again, it's always about the opportunities, and playing senior football, I think, for him is a must now. I think, what is he, 19 now at this stage, possibly 20. I just think he needs now to go and find the next step in his career. And Liam Millar as well, 21 on the day that this podcast will come out. Canada international, but again, nowhere near the first team. I think he's been around the squad for a little bit of time now. I think he's just ready to make that move away. And to be honest, I've been saying that maybe for 12, 18 months now. I think he's obviously come back and he's impressed. They needed numbers with a couple of injuries over the last couple of seasons, but I think for good of his career, I think it's probably best that he moves on. I think he did impress on Friday night. He was pretty decent, played off that left side and did, show a fair bit of creativity, but it's just, long term, what's best for the players. Sometimes you have to look at individuals rather than the team. I just don't see him making it full time at the top level, certainly for Liverpool, but potentially for somebody else. So certainly those two, I think, possibly need a lower move, and possibly you could say the same for Abdi Sharif as well. Obviously, a player that Stephen Gerrard was very vocal about when he was under 18s coach and worked with him. A midfielder can play on the right hand side as well. He's been injured for the last 12 months or so, just about come back, and he was an unused substitute against Manchester United, but he's signed a new contract whilst he was injured. He'd already signed his first professional deal about 12 or so months ago. Now 19, he doesn't really want to be sitting on the bench, I don't think, for the under-23s. So I think obviously they are easing him back in. As I say, had a very long ACL injury, I think it was, for him. It is a case of bringing him back slowly into the fray, but at some point you've got to make a decision. Potentially in January he could maybe go out to a Championship or possibly a League One club, and I think that would do him a world of good to get him some regular minutes, really regular senior football, rather than being on Liverpool under-23s bench and having bits and pieces. It's all about that consistency now. He's very, very talented. As I say, Stephen Gerrard absolutely loved him, but it's just a case of getting yourself into that team on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think we've still got just over or just under 3 weeks it is of the domestic window. So it'd be interesting to see if any of these young players do go out. Liam Millar, of course, has been to Kilmarnock for a fairly lengthy loan deal up in Scotland, but as you say, maybe ready to move on, maybe even on a permanent basis. One other player to touch on from the under-23s group, Matt, and played in the Carabao Cup for the senior side in the 7-2 win against Lincoln City, right at the heart of defence, and that is Rhys Williams. We've seen Billy Koumetio playing in pre-season for the first team, but in one of the competitive games, Rhys Williams was given his debut.
Yeah, I think he was probably just edging out Koumetio in terms of the game, just because of the physicality, the fact that he's been out in non-league last season. He's very much used to that, a year or so older as well, possibly a little bit more than that. So, yeah, it was interesting that he played on Thursday. I thought he did okay. He didn't particularly do anything, terrible or anything like that. But I just think it's possible that he will go out on loan. I'd be surprised with him next week, looking ahead to the next round 4 of the Carabao Cup. If he played a game, that would be a slight surprise, just because obviously it's a much improved opponent this week. Obviously, Arsenal twice in the space of 4 days. So it would be interesting to see who does play at centre-back on Thursday. But I would be surprised if it was Rhys Williams. I was surprised that it was Rhys Williams last week, so it shouldn't be too much of a shock, and I may well be wrong. But yeah, again, I think at his age, having had regular football and play at a sustained period week in, week out last season, it's time again for the next stage of his development. And I don't think you go directly from Kidderminster, where he was last season, into playing at Liverpool's first team. There's at least 1 or 2 steps between that. And I think it's probably the right time for him to take that next one.
Yeah, it would be some jump to go from National League North into the Premier League champions. But as you say, we'll have to wait and see if he does stick around. Let's move on, though, into the under-18s now, Matt, and recording on Saturday afternoon. Obviously, the podcast will be released on the Sunday, but the under-18s have been playing at home against Manchester City. How have they got on, and who were the ones to stand out in this?
Yeah, it was a decent performance. They did get beat 3-1 by Manchester City. City very, very clinical, actually. First thing to say is Mark Bridge-Wilkinson, obviously their relatively new manager, was missing because of a family bereavement. So they had Tim Jenkins, one of the analysts who works at the academy, was managing them. I don't think that would have made a huge difference. He's someone that they will all be very aware of and that sort of thing. He presumably would have had a little bit of an insight, an input into that was played, but I think obviously the usual manager would have sort of had that choice to make beforehand. But yeah, it was very much a case of City being very clinical. They took the chances. There was a couple of counter-attacks that Liverpool kind of got a little bit caught out on, and I think they were a little bit naive at times. But I was slightly surprised more really with the way that Manchester City played, not like their first team at all. Obviously, we've seen the likes of Liam Delap this week make their debuts. Delap scoring for City in the Carabao Cup. And it just seemed a little bit strange to me, the way they set up. They were very defensive, very much played on the counter-attack, packed the midfield, were very sort of rigid in the system that they played. But you would have thought with so much investment, particularly in the youth areas, they'd sort of be a little bit more sticking to their principles. So, yeah, City got the result that they wanted, I think, but certainly Liverpool were more, in terms of their under-18s, more of a Liverpool team than City were Manchester City or Pep Guardiola team.
Yeah, certainly. And Leighton Stewart has been one player who we've been keeping an eye on sort of over the course of the last couple of years, certainly last season as well. And yeah, you say 3-1 defeat. I take it there wasn't really much for him to feed off in this one.
No, Liverpool did have the vast majority of the possession. It was, very much a strange game where they should have really created a lot more than what they did, but he was a little bit isolated, very, very quiet. He was a hat-trick hero in the first game of the season, but in this one didn't really get too much of a sniff. And he looked a little bit frustrated, as I say, very much isolated. And even though Liverpool did have the ball and moved it fairly well, they just didn't quite have that final pass to move into him. So he was coming very deep at times, found himself out on the left wing at times, just seemed to get a little bit lost, really, which is a bit of a shame because he is one of those players that if you give him a chance, chances are he is going to finish it. So, yeah, up front on his own, obviously in that 4-3-3 system that Liverpool play, but it just didn't quite come off for him. I'm sure there'll be plenty more goals for him throughout the rest of this season. On this occasion, I think he found it very tough.
Another name to throw at you, and said his name before, he's been involved with the first team during pre-season, Billy Koumetio. He was in action for the under-18s. So you would have thought, having been in the first team, he might have been knocking on the door of being a regular within the under-23s, but that's not the case.
No, definitely not the case. Obviously, still 17, Billy Koumetio, and the fact that he was with the under-18s really suggests that, he's not quite ready for that first, which we have said all summer, really. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp is a big fan of him, understandably so. He is physically ready, but I think we saw today there was a little bit of naivety. One of the goals, I think, went down as an own goal for him in the end. passed the ball really under any pressure, miscontrolled it inside his own penalty area, and the ball ended up going past the goalkeeper, Jakub Osinski. So it wasn't the best afternoon for Billy Koumetio. I think he played about an hour or so and then got drawn. But yeah, we know how good he can be on the ball. We saw that in pre-season in Salzburg when they played there. It just wasn't to be the case, though, on this occasion. He didn't do particularly well, and I think it showed really the fact that he was playing for the under-18s. I think maybe two people have got a little bit ahead of themselves, a little bit excited. So it wasn't the best game from him. But yeah, the chances of him being a fourth choice centre-back this season for Liverpool, I think, probably not on this evidence in terms of this making a decisive difference in this. But I just think this possibly proved that he's a little bit of a way off that being the case. I'm sure, in 2 or 3 years' time, he'll be ready, and certainly he looks ready at this stage physically. But I just think there's a few little issues to be ironed out in his game, and that's exactly what playing for the under-18s is all about.
Yeah, completely understandable. His young age, what is he, 17, as you said before? Any other names from the 18 group that you want to pick out, Matt?
Yeah, a few different ones to discuss, really. I thought James Balagizi didn't have his best game today. We'll come to him shortly in terms of his new contract. Melkamu Frauendorf as well. Again, a little bit on the periphery, didn't quite have that impact that you'd expect him to have. But again, we will touch on him a little bit later because he is, a very exciting player. And Tyler Morton, I thought, was a big miss for Liverpool today. A tough tackling fielder, but certainly very good on the ball as well. And I think that sort of creativity, that link between the midfield and the attack was slightly missing for them today. So it's not expected to keep him out very long. It's probably a week or so, but I think the sooner he gets back in, the better. And obviously, if you've got a player like him around, I think someone like Balagizi could, very much sort of benefit from that. So it was interesting to sort of see the impact on him not being there. Certainly, I think they very much missed him, and Tom Hill as well. They missed. Again, we're going to come on to him and the injury that he's got. Difficult to sort of talk through that at the moment, but yeah, it looks like he's going to be out for a sustained period of time. So a few different names that sort of could have done a little bit better and you expected a little bit more of. But one new name that I hadn't seen and to be honest, hadn't heard of before, Isaac Maguire, came to the bench, an exciting 16-year-old midfielder, only turned 16 last Tuesday. So a very, very young player, still a schoolboy, but he scored a consolation goal, assisted actually by Frauendorf. But yeah, not a bad week for him. Only just turned 16 and then came off the bench to score a consolation in the end for Liverpool against Manchester City.
Yeah, we'll get to Frauendorf, Tom Hill and James Balagizi shortly. But before we do, last time we caught was before the season getting underway and looking ahead to what was to come. So if you don't mind, Matt, just fill in the blanks of where we are so far. We've obviously spoken about those games for the 23s and 18s in the last couple of days, but what else has been going on?
Yeah, we'll start with the under-23s. It was a good start to the season for them. They beat Everton on the opening day by a 1-0. Then went to Derby County, an excellent team at youth level, obviously a championship outlet at senior level, but certainly a very, very good team at youth level. So narrowly defeated there. And as we mentioned before, the EFL trophy, hammered 6-1 in the end by Wigan. Wigan's senior team, of course, that is that competition. So yeah, Leighton Clarkson mentioned his before. His goal put Liverpool in front in that one, but then, that lack of experience really shipped 7 or 6, I should say, in the second half. And yeah, it fell apart very quickly for them. I think the first half was very promising. It showed sort of the level that some of these players are at. That was an under-21 team, essentially, but there was, a fair bit of experience, even though it was a youth team in there. They did pretty well. They controlled the game. It was, very even for that first 45 minutes, but then Wigan made a substitution and turned the game around very quickly in that second half. So wasn't to be for them. I think they played Tranmere on Tuesday in the next round of that tournament. So that's a little group stage for them. So that'll be a big test for them to sort of see where they go from here and bounce back from that. But certainly, I think they will have learned some big lessons from that defeat.
Yes, certainly. And for the 18s, well, they said before, Leighton had got a hat in the first game of the season, beat Stoke 5-0. But as I understand, Matt, of course, the game that they had scheduled with Manchester United postponed for the time being due to COVID and obviously the threat that's posing right now.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah, the first game against Manchester United of the season for them was called off. They didn't take any risks at that moment in time. It's not been fully explained, I don't think, exactly why that game was called off, but I'm sure that will be rearranged for a time into the future. But yeah, the 5-0 win over Stoke certainly was a good start. And then obviously the defeat to Manchester City was their second game. So just to quickly mention, as you say, the Stuart hat-trick in that Stoke game. Also, Dominic Cornice, I've got to mention him. 2 goals directly from corners inside the same game. So not a bad left foot on him. Yeah, very, very much so. So yeah, I think the win possibly might have helped on one of them, but got to give him credit. 2 goals from exactly the same method. Not a normal one either.
No, I wonder what the XG on those is. We'd have to ask the data lads for that. But anyway, let's talk about a couple of the youngsters. Then we sort of did mention that we were going to get on to talking about. And first up, we'll start with some real positive news for James Balagizi. Signed his first professional contract. And I know this is a player, Matt, that you're very excited about, having written earlier in the week a piece on the Echo all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did some background research on him and spoke to a few people around him and the academy and various people who've seen him play for England's youth teams as well. And it was the case that he signed his first professional contract on Friday. That news came out around 11. So for anybody who's interested in reading more on him after what I've said here, you can go and check that out across the Echo website, James Balagizi. But I spoke to a few people. People might have heard of the Secret Scout across social media, who does a lot of England youth games and that sort of thing. He's compared him to Yaya Toure. Liverpool actually signed Balagizi from Manchester City at the age of 11, and he is a really highly rated midfielder. I'm always a little bit reticent to compare any youth player to a senior player, but I understand what he means in terms of getting hold of the ball, driving forward with it. I think that's certainly a strength of Balagizi. He can play in a few different positions. We saw him play today as more of a number 8. He can play as a 10 or a 6 as well. So he's very versatile, and I suppose that's kind of shown in the players. He did an interview during lockdown on who he models his game on, and there's a sort of a few big names in there. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne, Thiago Alcantara, and Fabinho as well. So certainly a few different styles that he's trying to mesh together. I think at some point he's going to have to decide, which one he wants to be rather than trying to be all 3 at the same time. But he only turned 17 around a week or so ago. Last Sunday it was. So Liverpool wasting no time, obviously, you have to turn 17 to sign your first professional contract. Liverpool not messing about at all with that. They wanted to get him tied down. Rightly so, as I say, he's come through the England youth system, the same team over the years as Jude Bellingham, who we've obviously seen move to Borussia Dortmund. Bellingham just, incidentally, has just become the first or the youngest under-21s goal scorer in the most recent international break. Obviously, had the move to Borussia Dortmund. I think he's started all 3 of their Bundesliga matches this season. So I'm sure that is something that Liverpool are trying to guard against with these youngsters. They don't want them to be poached and taken away. So obviously, it's a long way away. Balagizi, playing for the first team, and he's still got a lot of development to go. But certainly last season, scored his first goal for the under-18s at the age of 15. Ended it with 4 goals and 2 assists. And you just look at him and you think a lot of potential to be played with there. He's still, a very young player. As I say, only just turned 17. He's going to be a key man for the under-18s this season. And very much against Manchester City, his former club, even though it wasn't his best performance, it wasn't the game and the result that he would have wanted. I was still, very impressed by him every time he gets on the ball. He's got that dribbling, that close control that, you'd love to see any players, particularly in those midfield positions, being able to create and do things out of nothing. And yeah, he's certainly got the ability to do that.
No, certainly. And if he becomes any one of Thiago Alcantara, Kevin De Bruyne or Fabinho, then Liverpool, I'm sure, will be very, very delighted with what they'll have on their hands. And as you say, Jude Bellingham, not a bad player to obviously have played alongside and maybe try and reach similar heights. He's also become Borussia Dortmund's youngest ever scorer as well recently as well. But let's move on to the next man to talk about, and that being Tom Hill, who unfortunately, I remember last time we were speaking, we were really bigging up Tom Hill about this could be a real big season for him. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, and it's a really unfortunate, untimely injury for him. It's obviously a real shame, as we said on the last show. He's a really good box-to-box goal-scoring midfielder, kind of a rare player in that regard, really. I think he scored 9 times last season. Would have been a really crucial man for the under-18 this season. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, unfortunate. He's got an ACL injury. He's undergone successful surgery, but he is going to miss the majority of this season. It would be a surprise if he played, properly and go back to his best before the end of this season. So, even if, he's come out and said he promises to come back stronger and that sort of thing, he's got to keep himself mentally ready to make that return. But it is, a big blow. We've seen other players in similar sort of positions. We've seen Paul Glatzel. He's had, 2 or 3 of these, really serious injuries. He's got a slight one at the moment, which has kept him out of the start of this season. That's not anywhere near as bad as this one, but he has a couple in the past which have kept him out for, significant periods of time. And particularly when you're at Tom Hill's age, trying to establish yourself as an under-18 player. Got his first taste of senior action last season, of course, in the Carabao Cup around time of year. So yeah, it's a real unfortunate time for him. He is still, a really highly rated prospect. Only signed his first professional contract a few months ago. A few months later, they'd offered him improved terms and a new deal to keep him at the club. So, as I say, really highly rated, but really, really unfortunate in that he's got this injury now. And, having just come out of a lockdown for how many, months has it been to pick up this injury in training in Kirkby? Well, it wasn't even a match scenario. So, yeah, unfortunate timing for him. He's now going to have missed probably 18 months when you include the end of last season being cut short, lockdown. He's come back obviously into the season and then got this. So, yeah, it's a big blow for him. Hopefully he can come back sooner than first hoped.
Yeah, hope so. Hope that is the case. Hope he keeps his head high as well. As you say, a player with plenty of promise. Maybe someone Patzel about someone he can maybe get some advice off and an understanding of what he will be, of course, going through with the long-term injury. But before we go, time to do our one to watch. And we've spoken there about Balagizi and Hill. So the other player you wanted to speak about, Matt, is
Melkamu Frauendorf. He's the one to watch for this one. I've actually started to write a piece for our website on him, spoken to, again, a few different people around him. He was signed from Hoffenheim over the summer, so I've had a conversation with a few people who know him very well over in Germany. And, it's important with all of these players when they come into a new country, a new language, a new culture, they are going to take time to adjust. And I think we saw that with the under-18s game against Manchester City. He was kind of on the periphery, as I said, but he's somebody who's very much been impressing those at the academy in the early few weeks of his time here. So I think he signed 4 or 5 weeks ago now, so not been in here long, but again started the game today. I believe in Hoffenheim they played him more of an attacking midfielder, played sort of wide left and wide right today. I think he switched a couple of times during the game, but yeah, it's an exciting player, one to watch more just in terms of the sort of intrigue than anything else. I've not obviously seen a great deal of him, but the fact that he's come in and started a first couple of games in his new club, very highly rated, very highly thought of in Germany. I believe Bayern Munich were taking a look at him and he chose to come to Liverpool instead. So it's a big challenge for him to sort of come over here and adjust, as I say, and sort of acclimatise to the new environment. But you've got to hope that is the case. He is, by all accounts, a very shy, very quiet person. Left his brother, who's also a Hoffenheim player, a couple of years older for the first time. So, they've sort of grown up together, being in the same academy and that sort of thing. They've now been split and put into 2 different countries. And it's sort of those things that, people don't really think about with, these so-called wonder kids or whatever you want to term them, coming to different clubs, coming to a much bigger club as well than Hoffenheim in Liverpool. But yeah, I'm led to believe, as the piece will say when it comes out on our website, that he's convinced that he's made the right choice. His parents are and his family are. And crucially, I think as well, Hoffenheim are. Obviously, they will have wanted to have lost him, but the fact that he has left them and come to Liverpool, I think, his former coaches and that sort of thing, they think it's the right move for him to make. So yeah, a German youth international, very much one for the future. I think probably it's this time next year by the time we're really talking about, assessing where he's at Liverpool. I think for the moment it's just a case of acclimatising. But yeah, against Manchester City, I thought he was relatively direct, considering he was sort of playing a wider, more peripheral role than what he has done in the past. He was very, very good at pressing as well, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, Hoffenheim, a team Ralf Nick has been before. We saw in Jurgen Klopp's press conference on Friday, he was asked a question about Rangnick and sort of his development. Julian Nagelsmann as well, obviously, former Hoffenheim player and manager, I should say, and Roberto Firmino as well came from Hoffenheim. So, yeah, it was interesting to see that sort of tactical difference between him and the rest of his teammates. He seemed very good at pressing, which is obviously a big thing for Liverpool. So, yeah, to not really just one of those players that we don't know a huge amount at this time, but quite clearly is a very talented player and one that I will certainly be keeping my eye on over the next couple of months.
Yeah, very exciting stuff. Certainly to see how he does develop. Hopefully, he just first and foremost settles in and enjoys himself in Liverpool, in the area, and as we say, acclimatizes well, and then shows us what exactly he can do on the pitch over the coming months and years. Well, that's all from us here. This edition of the Academy Show here on the Blood Red channel. Do make sure to check out all of our content, whether that be on our podcast platforms or whether it be our dedicated YouTube channel. Plenty to get stuck into. Myself and Matt will be back, of course, next month. Look once again at what's going on at Kirkby with the Academy setup. But for now, thanks for your time and company. It's bye for now.